What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the 31 Days of Horror. I am your host, Mood616, and thank you once again for stopping in, guys. Yes, 31 Days of Horror Volume 9, Day 26 is coming at you live and direct. Alright, guys. So we're going to take it back to 1984 with a film released by TerrorVision, and it's a film I'd actually never heard of. And then once they announced it and put this thing out, I kept hearing from people that this movie was absolutely terrible and that it had a reputation for being like literally one of the worst movies ever. So I just kind of did a quick little search on it, and it's a pretty low rating on IMDb, which I don't really give a fuck about. And then Letterboxd, everyone's shitting on it, and I didn't want to read any reviews while going into this, so I wanted to do my 100% full assessment on this, but it compelled me to watch this and talk about it, because when I hear about a movie being known as one of the worst films everyone's ever seen, I have to see for myself what the fuck is so bad about this movie. And maybe my assessment is completely different. I don't know. But of course, from 1984, we're talking about The Jar, also known as Chardon. Yeah, Charon. I'm not really too sure where that title comes from, but yeah, maybe it's the demon inside of it. I have no idea. So basically this one follows our main character, Paul. He is, the film starts out, Paul gets into an accident with this old man and stuff, and anyways, he's got this mysterious jar in this package kind of deal and stuff like that. But he insists on not going to the hospital and stuff. So Paul ends up taking him back to his apartment, and along with this mysterious jar thing or whatever. So as soon as they get back to the apartment, 5 minutes later, this old man disappears from the apartment and leaves the mysterious jar behind. And not long after that, Paul starts experiencing hallucinations and weird. He's obviously seeing shit. Weird shit starts happening to him. It just everything's kind of going bonkers and stuff like that. And that's basically the premise to the film. Now, my thoughts on the jar. Okay, so my initial thoughts when I got about halfway through this film was, okay, so let's just start with the good. Now, this is one of those movies where I feel like there's got to be a point. There has to be, subtext to the film. There has to be maybe this whole movie's an allegory. Maybe it's a metaphor for something. So you get about halfway in the film, and I kept thinking to myself, it just feels like a collection of hallucinations and a lot of weirdness and shit like that that's going on. And it was very reminiscent to me of Eraserhead, where David Lynch always claims that there's no subtext to the film, and that, he just did a collection of, he shot a bunch of shit, put it together, it was a student film, blah, blah, blah. Now people seem to, differ with his mentality on that and try to decipher exactly what that film means, but it doesn't matter. It's all subjective anyways. So when it comes to this movie, I just felt like it was a series of scene after scene after scene, because at first it feels like it's very isolated. Paul's in his apartment and he's just kind of dealing with all this weird shit that's happening. He looks in his bathtub, there's blood starts coming out of it, and there's also a person in the bathtub, it's all bloody and shit like that. He's seeing the weird old man in mirrors, and he's having visions of him and stuff like that, and he's having all just weird shit's happening to him all over the place and stuff. And it just kind of keeps doing that over and over again. And then finally the film, it kind of goes outside a little bit. He ends up outside and he's out in the streets and stuff like that. And eventually ends up meeting one of his neighbors in the elevator in his apartment and stuff. And she's like, oh, you live here? And he's like, yeah, I never see you around. Blah. He's like, oh, I'm always working and stuff like that. Anyways, he helps her bring her rocking chair that she just bought into her apartment, and they kind of spark up a relationship. And it's such a weird thing, because Paul is obviously not right, and their first meeting, he's kind of yelling at her and stuff, and he's just very apprehensive towards her and stuff, but she's so forgiving, and so she's absorbing everything because she wants to be with him and stuff. It's kind of and I started thinking to myself, I'm like, well, that's kind of a little bit of subtext, maybe the things that he's dealing with and stuff like that. And the whole film kind of rinse, wash, and repeats itself over and over again with all these visions and stuff like that. And then it gets into the third act where there's one scene by a river and things like that. And then it all kind of clicked for me. I'm like, you don't make a movie like this without throwing some type of subtext. This movie is probably most likely an allegory or a metaphor for PTSD. I'm thinking a little bit of PTSD, even isolation, dealing with trauma, even loneliness and stuff like that. All these things are very, very prevalent in the film. Now, it's one of those weird films that doesn't really have it doesn't have a lot of plot to it. It's just a series of scenes and scenes and scenes. Like, you don't know much about Paul at all. You know that he works in a lab because his coworkers come by a few times because he's been spaced out, not showing up to work and things like that. So he's very concerned about him. And then he notices that something's terribly wrong with him because he's just acting all strange. Paul claims that it's like a virus or whatever and stuff like that. And he just completely tripping out, like hardcore. And so it just kind of keeps doing things like that throughout the film. And but once the film kind of completes itself, you kind of get this idea that all these things were kind of trying to be in the subtext of probably things like that. Again, it's also because you don't know shit about Paul. That's one of those weird things. Like, there's no plot. There's no backstory. You're just dealing with visions and things like that. So you kind of have to decipher and read between the lines of everything that you're seeing. And then you chalk up your own subjective views of what's happening and stuff like that. But I think the end of the movie kind of gives it away. And I think some of the best imagery and some of the best scenes that are in the film are actually towards the end. Like, there's a pretty cool like kind of war scene towards the end in this river. And there's also this really odd scene where you have like, I would say almost like the Knights Templar, like in these black robes and hoods carrying up this cross up this hill. It's very kind of Templar-ish and stuff like that, and he has that type of visions and shit like that. But I don't know, I think a lot of what's happening in the film can be related to dealing with trauma, hence the car accident. But the car accident is actually just an after effect of possibly being in the Vietnam War and dealing with PTSD and stuff like that. And then also your isolation, because he's like, this guy's probably in his 30s. He's obviously not married. Doesn't have kids. Who knows what his backstory is, but he seems like he's kind of isolated himself. He's kind of one of those workworms that just goes to work and comes home, kind of does those things and stuff like that. But essentially, you know nothing about him. So you kind of decipher read between the lines and stuff. And but the jar itself, it's weird because going into this film, I thought it was going to be about like this killer jar kind of thing. I was going to be, it's just one of those really bad films. You do get to see what's in the jar when he opens up it's just in a brown paper bag, whatever. It's like this demon fetus child thing that's in there. And soon as he sees it, that's kind of, I guess, what kind of possesses him in a sense, right? And, he kind of goes through all these motions throughout the film and stuff like that. But, I don't even think I said what the good stuff was. But anyways, I was just kind of going through all the motions of the film. But the one thing I really do like about the film is the music. The synth score in this is fantastic. It's really, really good. The music is actually fucking amazing. And I was like quite compelled by this. Another thing I really liked about the film is how it was shot. It was shot on 35 miller, shot in scope. So it looks fantastic. There's a couple scenes where the elements aren't the greatest. Like, I watched it in the high contrast. There's two versions. You can watch it in high contrast and low contrast. I watched it in the high because why not? And there's one scene where he's outside where it like kind of hyper exposes the colors and stuff, so it doesn't really look that great. But for the most part, the entire film actually does pop pretty well and looks really good. The editing's good. I think there's a lot of really great ideas here. If he was going for the whole PTSD type angle, I'm not 100% sure. That's just my subjective thoughts on the film. I don't really think it's just what I think it is. I don't know. I'm just deciphering what I'm seeing on screen and stuff like that. But I could see why people would really hate this movie because it's definitely not something that you want to throw on if you have to want to think about shit and stuff. But it's a decent film to talk about if you're just sitting down and watching with a critical eye to review it and talk about it. Because if I was just watching this generally, I probably wouldn't have taken it as... I wouldn't have absorbed it as much as I really was when I was watching it this time. And, but I'm a visual person. I'm a very, very visual person when it comes to films, and I like movies like this. Eraserhead's actually one of my all-time favorite movies. Now, that movie can be considered to be just a bunch of nonsense with awesome scenes and stuff like that. Sure, why not? Is there subtext? I don't fucking know. But when it comes to this, I feel like this filmmaker wasn't just trying to do a collection of scenes. Apparently the budget on this thing was like $200,000, which is crazy, but there is a lot of locations. There is a lot of effects, visual effects and stuff like that, and a lot of things that are happening. It's constant. It's literally constant through the almost 90-minute runtime of the movie, which is crazy to me. For me, it was never really boring. I think one of the worst things about the movie, though, is kind of the dialogue. There's a scene where he goes out with the girl for dinner, and the dialogue is super mundane and super hard to get through. It's just not written well, hence why there's really kind of no plot to it and stuff like that. And also, I think the biggest downer for myself is the lead actor, Paul. He's not really great at portraying his emotions properly. Like, to be honest, like, I don't really like to shit on people, but like with their acting and stuff, but I feel like for this type of movie where he's dealing with so much, like he's obviously dealing with a lot of issues, like he doesn't know what's going on, he's trying to figure it out, and he's freaking out, he's getting mad and stuff, but when he's yelling and showcasing these emotions, I don't think they're coming out properly, which is kind of fucked up. But I think if there was a better performance in the film, I think it would have been a little bit better on the scale for myself. But again, I'm a very visual person. I like what I was seeing most of the time. I thought some of the visuals are really cool. There's one really creepy scene in this film where he's actually in the girl's apartment and he sees something in the mirror, and it's very subtle. And I love the way they shot it, though. It's actually really well done because she's creeping into the mirror and something else is there, and it kind of comes in and comes out with her and stuff. And it's pretty fucking awesome, actually. It's something you could totally miss if you were in and out of the film, even at that point. So, but yeah, the jar, man, this is a jarring film, for a lack of a better pun. I don't know, like I just finished watching this and I'm still trying to convey its projection. I feel like I understand, and I feel like my assessment in my eyes is right, but it might not be. I don't know. I'm just trying to I'm trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together, because this is not a very cohesive story. It doesn't have a straight up linear plot, right? It's a collection of scenes and it's a collection of mindfucks is really what it is. But I don't think it's a horribly made movie. I just don't think it's a great movie in terms of like something that everybody wants to sit down and watch. This is not a party movie. If you threw this on at a party, people would be fucking snoring in 5 minutes. 100% of the time. And that's a shame, because, I think visually and, sound-wise and stuff, and there's a lot of creativity going on here, but I just feel like the direction of the film could have used a little bit more actual story. Like it could have actually used a little bit more things involved there. Maybe a little bit less of hallucinations and trip outs and things like that. With that said, I'm still going to give this one a 6 out of 10, believe it or not. I know most commonly people are giving it 1s and 2s. It's not that bad. Really is not that bad. I just don't think it's going to be for the majority of people, but it's definitely worth the one-time watch. And it's something I actually would sit down and watch again. And it's a film I'd like to talk to people about. So if you've actually seen this film and you have any thoughts on it, just let me know your thoughts on it, because I like to kind of go back and forth and just kind of, intertwine, thoughts and stuff like that, and kind of decipher some of the shit that's going on in here. But I don't know. I think the PTSD thing is a safe bet. It might just be... I mean, it's pretty obvious given the time, 1984. It's shortly after. He's about the age where he would have been in Nam and things like that. So it does make a lot of sense, and it does give you those visuals and things like that and stuff. So, but yeah, it definitely deals with a lot of those type of issues, even mental illness, like I said, isolation, loneliness, trauma, PTSD, which is obviously trauma. But yeah, not the worst thing in the world. I really don't get it, but I understand, because this movie had a lot of really shitty releases before. In fact, I think it was originally released in like a full screen, and this thing was shot in scope, right? So it's in wide 2.35 to 1 aspect ratio. So if you're watching it in 4:3 full screen, you're not seeing half the fucking picture. Now, I don't know if that's going to change anyone's mind, but the transfer is pretty good. So anyways, that is going to be The Jar from 1984. Glad I picked it up and watched it finally, because it's compelling. It's a different type of film that I feel like is something that is you're either going to like it or hate it, man. I don't think there's any in between on this. Even though I'm about a 6, it's mostly because of the visuals and stuff, but I digress, guys. That's going to do it here for day 26. I'll be back tomorrow on day 27 with another film I've been looking forward to watching for a long time, so stay tuned for that one. And as per usual,